The cargo hold of the transport ship reeked of sweat and fear. 200 human workers sat packed together like livestock, their heads down, shoulders slumped in defeat. David Stone watched them through the observation window and felt his jaw clench. These were miners returning from the asteroid belt, men and women who had spent 6 months in the dark, pulling rare metals from floating rocks while their alien overseers counted every gram. 50 years had passed since humanity first made contact with the Galactic Federation. 50 years since Earth learned it was not alone in the universe. What should have been the greatest moment in human history had turned into the longest nightmare. The Federation welcomed Earth with open arms and smiling faces, offering protection and guidance to the young species. They called humans their newest family members and promised a bright future among the stars. The reality was different. Humans became the galaxy's workforce, the ones who took the dangerous jobs that other species could not or would not do. They worked in the deep mines where radiation levels would kill most aliens in minutes. They cleaned the toxic waste from industrial planets where the atmosphere burned through protective suits. They built space stations in the vacuum of space while more advanced species watched from safe distances. David had served in the Earth Defense Force before it was disbanded. The Federation explained that human military forces were unnecessary, since the galaxy was at peace. They offered him a new job as a transport captain, moving cargo and workers between human colonies and Federation worlds. It paid well and kept food on the table, but every day felt like betrayal. He was helping to maintain the system that kept his people down. His ship, the Defiance, was one of the few vessels Earth was allowed to keep. The Federation controlled most of human space travel, claiming it was for safety reasons. They said, humans were not ready for advanced navigation systems or powerful weapons. Better to let experienced species handle such things while humans focused on their strengths. Manual labor, resource extraction, the jobs that required endurance rather than intelligence. Ana Torres, his pilot, emerged from the cockpit with a tired expression. She had been with David for 3 years now, ever since the Federation decided that human pilots were only suitable for short-range flights. She was one of the best pilots he had ever seen, able to navigate through asteroid fields and solar storms that made alien computers shut down in terror. But according to Federation records, she was barely qualified to fly supply runs. "We're approaching Orbital Station Gamma," Anna said quietly. "The Kythera supervisor wants to inspect the workers before we dock." David nodded grimly. The Kythera were one of the 3 ruling species in the Federation. They looked like giant insects with shells that gleamed like polished metal. They controlled most of the galaxy's trade and had a reputation for efficiency above all else. Human workers who failed to meet their standards faced punishment that could range from reduced food rations to being sent to worse assignments on dead worlds. Through the window, David could see Orbital Station Gamma growing larger. The station was massive, big enough to house 1 million beings. Humans had built most of it, working in shifts around the clock for 5 years while Kythera engineers supervised. Now it served as a processing center for raw materials from a dozen star systems. The humans who worked there lived in cramped quarters and rarely saw sunlight, but Federation officials called it progress. The docking process took 2 hours. Federation regulations required multiple inspections and paperwork checks for any ship carrying human workers. David stood in the cargo bay and watched as Supervisor Klext, a particularly large Kythera, examined each worker with cold, compound eyes. The humans remained silent and kept their heads down. They had learned that eye contact with their overseers was considered aggressive behavior. One young man, barely out of his teens, stumbled slightly as he stepped forward for inspection. He had been working in zero gravity for months, and his legs were still adjusting to the station's artificial gravity. Supervisor Klext made a clicking sound that David recognized as anger. "This unit is defective," Klext announced in the mechanical translation voice that all Kythera used. "Coordination is below acceptable standards." Reassign to waste processing duties. The young man's face went pale. Waste processing meant working with toxic chemicals without proper protection. Most humans assigned there developed serious health problems within months. David felt his hands form fists, but forced himself to stay calm. Any protest would make things worse for everyone. But then the young man spoke up. "Please, Supervisor, I just need a moment to adjust. I can work fine, I promise." Klext's shell rattled with displeasure. "Units do not speak unless spoken to. This demonstrates further defectiveness." The insect alien moved with surprising speed, striking the young man across the face with one of its sharp limbs. Blood ran down the human's cheek as he fell to his knees. The other workers flinched but said nothing. They had seen this before. David took a step forward, but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. Admiral Richards stood behind him, the man who commanded all human operations in this sector. His face was stone, but David could see the pain in his eyes. "Don't," Richards whispered. "You know what will happen." David knew. Any interference with Federation discipline would result in Earth losing its protected status. That was the threat that hung over humanity every day. Step out of line and the Federation would withdraw their protection. Earth would be cut off from trade, left to starve while other species took over human colonies. Millions would die. So David watched as the bleeding young man was dragged away to his new assignment. He watched as the other workers were processed and sent to their quarters. He signed the transport documents and accepted payment in Federation credits that were worth less each year. He smiled and nodded when Supervisor Klext complimented him on maintaining order among his human cargo. That night, while the Defiance sat docked at the station, David received an encrypted message on his personal communicator. The sender was listed as Dr. Emma Cross, a name he recognized from the early days of Federation contact. She had been one of Earth's top scientists, sent to study alien biology and culture. That was 15 years ago. Since then, her reports had become rare and heavily censored. The message was brief. "They are not what they seem. The humans they think are weak, we are the anomaly. Meet me at Kepler Station. Trust no one else. What I have learned will change everything." David stared at the message until it automatically deleted itself. Change everything. After 50 years of servitude, after watching his people reduced to a slave race, someone claimed to have information that could change everything. It could be a trap. It could be Federation security testing his loyalty, but it could also be hope. He thought about the young man with blood on his face, about the 200 workers in his cargo hold, about the billions of humans across the galaxy who went to sleep each night knowing they were considered less than the aliens who ruled over them. If there was even a chance that things could change, he had to take it. David began planning a course to Kepler Station. Kepler Station floated in the darkness between stars, far from any inhabited system. It was a research outpost built by humans decades ago to study cosmic radiation, but Federation budget cuts had reduced it to skeleton crew status. Most aliens avoided the station because the radiation levels made them sick. For humans, it was just another workplace. David's ship approached the station 3 weeks after receiving the mysterious message. He had told his crew they were making a supply run, but Ben Walsh, his engineer, had already figured out something was wrong. Ben was good at reading people and machinery, which made him valuable in both respects. He kept the ship running and kept David honest when stress made him stupid. Maya Singh, their communications officer, had managed to encrypt their flight plan, so Federation tracking systems would show them visiting a mining colony instead of this abandoned station. She was young but brilliant with computers, able to make Federation technology do things its creators never intended. Like many humans in technical fields, she had learned to work around the limitations imposed by their alien overseers. The docking bay was empty, except for one small vessel David didn't recognize. The station's life support was running on minimum power, making the air thin and cold. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down empty corridors that should have been bustling with activity. It felt like exploring a tomb. Dr. Emma Cross waited for them in the main laboratory. David almost didn't recognize her. The woman who had once briefed Earth's leaders on alien cultures was now thin and worn, her hair streaked with premature gray. But her eyes still burned with intelligence and something that might have been hope. "Thank you for coming," she said, simply. "I wasn't sure you would." Anna, Ben, and Maya hung back while David approached the doctor. The laboratory around them was filled with biological samples and data screens showing genetic charts that meant nothing to David. This was clearly where Dr. Cross had been working for years, studying something important enough to risk everything. "Your message said you learned something that would change everything," David said. "I've seen enough suffering to know that everything needs to change, but I also know the Federation has weapons that could turn Earth into dust. So tell me what's so important that it's worth the risk." Dr. Cross gestured to the screens around them. "Everything we've been told about humanity's place in the galaxy is a lie. We're not the weak species that needs protection. We're not the primitive race that should be grateful for Federation guidance. We are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and the Federation leadership knows it." She activated a holographic display showing genetic comparisons between humans and various alien species. The data was complex, but even David could see the differences highlighted in bright red. "I've spent 15 years studying the biology of every Federation species," Dr. Cross continued. "Do you know what I found? They're all basically the same. Oh, they look different on the outside, but genetically they're remarkably similar. They all evolved on worlds with stable climates, abundant resources, and few natural disasters. Their evolution was guided by intelligence and cooperation, not survival." She changed the display to show Earth's history. Images of ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and mass extinctions filled the air around them. Earth is different. Earth is a hell world by galactic standards. Our planet tried to kill us every few thousand years with global catastrophes. We survived ice ages that lasted for millennia. We survived asteroid impacts that blocked out the sun. We survived volcanic explosions that poisoned the air. And we didn't just survive, we thrived. Maya stepped closer, fascinated despite herself. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we're built different," Dr. Cross said. "Every human is, adapted for extreme survival. We can work in radiation levels that would kill an Althari in minutes. We can survive gravity that would crush Kithara exoskeletons. We can endure temperatures and atmospheric pressure that would destroy Omnari energy matrices." Ben frowned. "But they have better technology than us. They have weapons we can't match." "Technology they can't maintain without us," Dr. Cross replied. "Who do you think keeps their space stations running? Who works in the reactor cores where radiation would kill them? Who pilots ships through dangerous regions of space that their computers can't navigate? Humans. We don't just do the manual labor, we do the jobs that their species literally cannot survive." Anna was studying the genetic data with growing amazement. "This says human bone density is 3 times Federation average. Our muscle efficiency is off the charts. Our immune systems can handle toxins that don't even have names in Federation languages." "Exactly. But here's the real secret." Dr. Cross pulled up classified Federation documents, their alien text scrolling across multiple screens. "The Federation leadership has known this from the beginning. These are internal communications from the High Council. They call us the sleeper threat and potential galaxy enders. They've kept us suppressed not out of kindness, but out of fear." David felt the world shift around him. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. Humanity wasn't the protected junior partner in a galactic civilization. They were the imprisoned apex predator, kept docile by lies and artificial limitations. "How did you get these documents?" he asked. Dr. Cross smiled grimly. Some Federation members aren't happy with the current system. They believe in actual cooperation between species, not domination disguised as protection. They've been helping me gather evidence for years. The laboratory's alarm suddenly activated, filling the air with harsh warning tones. Maya ran to the communications console and quickly scanned the incoming signals. Federation security ships, incoming fast, she announced. 3 vessels, all armed. Through the station's windows, they could see lights approaching in the darkness. Dr. Cross moved quickly, uploading files to a portable data storage device. "Take this," she said, pressing the device into David's hands. "Everything I've learned is in there. The truth about human capabilities, the Federation's real motives, and a list of sympathetic aliens who might help us." The first security ship docked with a violent shudder that shook the entire station. Ben was already moving toward the Defiance, but Dr. Cross grabbed David's arm. "There's something else," she said urgently. "The Federation is planning something called the Efficiency Initiative. They're going to separate human families, implant control devices in workers, and eliminate colonies that aren't profitable. It starts next month." Federation security forces stormed into the laboratory, led by an Althari whose crystal body glowed with authority. The Althari were the third ruling species, tall beings made of living crystal who served as judges and enforcers. This one radiated the cold certainty of absolute power. "Dr. Emma Cross," the crystal being announced in perfectly pronounced English, "you are charged with theft of classified information and sedition against galactic peace." David's crew made it to their ship, but Dr. Cross was surrounded. As security, forces bound her with energy restraints. She looked directly at David. "Tell them," she shouted over the sound of alien weapons powering up. "Tell all of them what we really are. Tell them we don't have to be slaves anymore." The Althari Inquisitor turned its attention to David. "Captain Stone, you will surrender the stolen data and submit to interrogation." David felt the weight of the storage device in his pocket. Everything depended on the next few seconds. Anna had the ship ready for departure. Ben had bypassed the docking clamps. Maya was jamming Federation communications. All he had to do was run, but as he looked at Dr. Cross being dragged away, he realized running wasn't enough anymore. The truth she had discovered was bigger than one person or one ship. It was the key to changing everything, just as her message had promised. "I don't know what you're talking about," David lied to the Inquisitor. "We just came here to deliver supplies." The Althari's crystal body flared with anger, but David was already moving. His crew launched the Defiance just as Federation ships opened fire. The little transport ship dove into the radiation field that surrounded Kepler Station, using the cosmic storms as cover while enemy weapons malfunctioned in the interference. As they escaped into hyperspace, David pulled out the data device Dr. Cross had given him. Inside was the truth that could free humanity or get them all killed. Either way, the galaxy was about to change. He began making a list of people he trusted, humans who might be ready to hear what their species really was. News of Dr. Cross's execution reached Earth 3 days before David's ship arrived in the solar system. The official report stated she had died during interrogation, but underground sources claimed she was executed publicly on the Althari homeworld as a warning to other potential troublemakers. Either way, the woman who had discovered humanity's true nature was gone. David sat in his quarters aboard the Defiance, staring at the data device she had died protecting. The files contained 15 years of research proving that humans were not the weak species the Federation claimed them to be. But they also contained something else, detailed plans for what Dr. Cross called the Efficiency Initiative. The Federation was done pretending to be humanity's protector. New regulations would require all human workers to receive neural implants that monitored their thoughts and controlled their actions. Families would be broken up to prevent organized resistance. Children would be taken to Federation education centers where they would learn to be grateful servants. Any colony that failed to meet production quotas would have its atmosphere modified to support alien settlers instead. It was genocide dressed up as administrative policy. and it was scheduled to begin in 2 weeks. Maya had spent days encrypting Dr. Cross's files and embedding them in routine cargo manifests and maintenance reports. The data was spreading through human space via the same communication networks the Federation used to control them. Ship captains, colony administrators, and work crew leaders were receiving fragments of the truth, pieces that formed a picture of both hope and horror. Ben had been modifying the Defiance's systems, preparing for missions that weren't officially approved. Extra fuel storage, encrypted communication arrays, and hidden weapon compartments that would pass casual inspection but could be activated if needed. He worked quietly, as he did everything, but David could see the anger building in his friend's normally calm face. Anna spent her time studying star charts and navigation data, plotting courses to human settlements that were off the main shipping routes. If they were going to build a resistance movement, they needed to reach people before the Federation realized what was happening. She had identified dozens of colonies and mining operations where humans worked in isolation, places where the truth could take root and grow. President Victoria Wells of Earth had requested a private meeting with David upon his return. The meeting took place in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath New Geneva, far from Federation monitoring stations. Wells was a practical politician who had spent decades managing the careful balance between human autonomy and alien oversight. She looked exhausted. "How bad is it?" she asked, after David had shown her the complete files. "Worse than we thought," David replied. "They're not just planning to increase control over us. They're planning to eliminate human culture entirely, turn us into a slave species that doesn't even remember being free." Wells studied the data on a portable screen, her face growing pale as she read. The neural implants would make organized resistance impossible. Once they're installed, humans would be physically unable to disobey Federation commands. "Dr. Cross believed we could stop it," David said. "Her research shows we're stronger than any other species in the galaxy. We've just never been allowed to use that strength." "Strength doesn't matter against orbital bombardment weapons," Wells replied. "If we rebel openly, they'll destroy every human world." But even as she spoke, Wells was making calculations. David could see her political mind working through possibilities, weighing risks against potential outcomes. She had not become Earth's leader by avoiding difficult decisions. "There might be another way," she said finally. "Dr. Cross's files mention sympathetic aliens, Federation members who disagree with current policies. If we could convince them to support us, it wouldn't be humans against the galaxy." David had already thought of that. "The problem is proving we deserve support. As long as we act like helpless victims, they'll see us as helpless victims. We need to show them what humans are really capable of." Over the following week, a network began to form. Captain Rick Murphy of the mining vessel Iron Eagle was the first to respond to David's encrypted messages. Murphy commanded a crew that worked in the asteroid belts, extracting rare metals in conditions that killed most aliens within hours. His people were tough, experienced, and angry about decades of mistreatment. Commander Lisa Parker of the agricultural ship Green Horizon brought a different perspective. Her crew managed food production for a dozen worlds, working in extreme temperatures and toxic atmospheres that made growing anything a constant battle. They were fewer in number but controlled resources that kept entire star systems fed. Captain Tom Bradley of the construction vessel. Heavy-lift coordinated workers who built space stations and orbital platforms throughout the sector. His people had access to industrial equipment and detailed knowledge of Federation infrastructure. They knew where the critical systems were and how to disable them. Each ship captain brought others: engineer crews, transport pilots, medical staff, and administrators who had spent decades keeping the Federation running while being treated as expendable labor. The network grew carefully, with each member personally vouched for by someone already trusted. Maya coordinated communications, creating a system that used Federation networks against themselves. Messages were hidden in routine reports, shipping, schedules, and maintenance logs. To alien observers, it looked like normal human work chatter. In reality, it was the planning of a rebellion that spanned hundreds of worlds. Ben focused on technical preparations. His modifications to the Defiance became a template that other ships could follow. Weapons hidden in cargo containers, communication systems that could broadcast on forbidden frequencies, life support modifications that would let humans survive, in conditions that would kill their alien overseers. Anna mapped escape routes and safe havens. If the rebellion failed, they needed places where humans could survive until another opportunity arose. She identified dead worlds with toxic atmospheres where humans could live but aliens could not, asteroid fields too dangerous for Federation ships to navigate, and nebulae where radiation would blind alien sensors. The plan that emerged was simple and desperate. Every human in Federation space would stop working on the same day. Complete shutdown of all human labor, from the deepest mines to the highest orbital stations. The Federation would be forced to choose between negotiating with humanity or attempting to replace millions of specialized workers. It was Dr. Cross's final gift to her species, the knowledge that humans were not just another workforce. They were the workforce. Without human labor, the Federation would collapse within weeks. President Wells had been making her own preparations on Earth. Military veterans were being quietly recruited for emergency response training. Industrial facilities were being retooled to produce equipment that looked like construction tools, but could serve as weapons. Children were being taught survival skills disguised as outdoor education programs. The breaking point came sooner than expected. Federation forces arrived at New Geneva Colony with an ultimatum: accept the Efficiency Initiative immediately or face atmospheric restructuring. 200,000 humans had 72 hours to submit to neural implantation or watch their world become uninhabitable. The colony's governor tried to negotiate, but Federation commanders were not interested in discussion. This was a test case, a demonstration of what would happen to any human settlement that resisted the new order. Other colonies would be given the same choice: submit or die. David received the news while his ship was docked at Terra Station, the largest human installation in space. Around him, hundreds of human workers continued their shifts, unaware that their species was about to face extinction or liberation. He activated the emergency communication protocol Maya had designed. Across human space, hidden transmitters began broadcasting a simple message: the time has come. Silence begins now. Within hours, the greatest labor strike in galactic history had begun. Humans simply stopped working. Mining operations shut down. Transport ships remained docked. Construction projects halted mid-build. Food production ceased. The vast machinery of Federation civilization ground to a halt as its most essential workers walked away from their posts. The Federation had two choices: destroy the species they depended on or find a way to negotiate. Either option would change the galaxy forever. The first day of the Great Silence, Federation officials treated it as a minor labor dispute. High Counselor Thex, the Althari leader who governed the core worlds, issued statements about temporary human dysfunction and authorized standard punishment. Protocols, work supervisors threatened reduced rations. Colony administrators activated compliance systems designed to force humans back to their jobs. Nothing worked. Humans remained in their quarters, in their ships, in their communities, but they did not work. No ore came from the asteroid mines. No food moved from agricultural worlds. No construction continued on the massive projects that kept Federation civilization expanding. For the first time in 50 years, humans simply said no by the third day. Supply shortages began appearing on Federation worlds. The Cathera trademasters initially dismissed this as a temporary inconvenience, but their computer models showed alarming trends. Without human workers, production had dropped by 70% across all essential industries. Alien species could not replace human labor because they could not survive in the environments where humans worked. David watched the developing crisis from Terra Station, humanity's largest space-based facility. The station housed 50,000 humans and served as a hub for transportation throughout the sector. Under normal circumstances, it buzzed with activity as ships came and went, carrying cargo and workers. Now it sat silent, its docking bays empty, its cargo holds sealed. Station Administrator Carol Webb had joined the resistance early, convincing her security forces and maintenance crews to support the strike. Webb had managed Terra Station for 12 years, watching Federation officials take credit for human achievements while treating her people like expendable tools. She understood better than most how dependent the aliens were on human expertise. "They still don't get it," Webb told David as they watched Federation ships gathering outside the station. "Look at them. They think this is about labor disputes and wage negotiations. They have no idea we're fighting for our survival as a free species." Anna had been monitoring Federation communications, tracking the growing panic in alien government centers. The Althari were calling emergency sessions of the High Council. The Kythera were frantically trying to maintain trade routes with skeleton crews of their own people. The Omnari were discovering that their energy-based civilization required constant maintenance by beings who could work in high-radiation environments. "The Federation's infrastructure is collapsing faster than they expected," Anna reported. "Life support systems are failing on stations where humans did the maintenance. Their deep space mining operations have shut down completely because no other species can work in those conditions." Ben had been coordinating with other human engineers throughout Federation space, implementing the second phase of their plan. While the work stoppage created obvious problems, subtle sabotage was creating hidden disasters. Critical systems were developing mysterious malfunctions. Computer networks were experiencing cascade failures. Power distribution systems were randomly shutting down with no apparent cause. The beauty of Ben's approach was that it looked like equipment failure rather than sabotage. Alien investigators would find that key components had worn out or been installed incorrectly, but they would not find evidence of intentional damage. The systems were simply failing because humans were no longer there to maintain them properly. Maya had successfully infiltrated the Federation's central communication network, broadcasting Dr. Cross's complete research files to every world in known space. The truth about human capabilities and Federation deception spread like wildfire through alien populations who had never questioned their government's version of events. The reaction was explosive. On Althari crystal worlds, philosophical debates raged about the ethics of enslaving a species while claiming to protect them. Kythera trade councils faced angry questions about economic policies based on deception and exploitation. Omnari energy collectives struggled to understand how they had become dependent on beings they considered primitive. Some Federation worlds experienced riots as alien populations realized their comfortable lives were built on human suffering. Others saw peace movements demanding immediate negotiations with humanity. A few military commanders called for the complete destruction of human worlds, but they were shouted down by leaders who understood that would eliminate the workforce, keeping their civilization alive. President Wells had been in secret communication with the moderate alien leaders Dr. Cross had identified. Counselor Nixa, a reform-minded Kythera, was building support for a complete restructuring of Federation governance. Harmonic Valdris, an Omnari philosopher, was arguing that true galactic civilization required equality between species, not domination, by the powerful over the weak. But the hardliners were not giving up without a fight. Inquisitor Vorth, the Althari enforcer who had captured Dr. Cross, assembled a battle fleet to crush what he called the Human Rebellion. His plan was simple: destroy Terra Station as an example, then systematically eliminate human colonies, until the survivors returned to work. The fleet approached Terra Station with overwhelming firepower, expecting token resistance from frightened workers. Instead, they encountered something they had never seen before: humans fighting back with everything they had. Ben's modifications to the station's systems proved their worth. Hidden weapon ports opened in what appeared to be cargo bays. Defensive, shields activated with power levels that should have been impossible for human technology. Communication jammers disrupted Federation battle coordination while human-modified computers took control of enemy systems. But the real surprise came when Vorth's flagship began experiencing critical malfunctions. Life support failed, navigation, systems crashed, and weapon controls became unresponsive. The great warship that was supposed to destroy human resistance instead found itself drifting helplessly as its crew faced the choice between retreat and death. Similar malfunctions struck other Federation vessels as Ben's sabotage programs activated across their fleets. Ships that had been maintained by human workers for decades suddenly discovered that those workers had left behind some unpleasant surprises. Not enough to cause immediate destruction, but enough to make military action impossible. Anna coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel from Terra Station while combat teams prepared for possible boarding actions. But the Federation forces were in no condition to board anything. Their ships were limping back to safe harbors while emergency repair crews tried to figure out what had gone wrong. The success at Terra Station was repeated throughout human space. Federation forces discovered that their military superiority meant nothing when their equipment stopped working. Decades of dependence on human maintenance and technical expertise had created vulnerabilities that no alien commander had considered. Meanwhile, the economic crisis was reaching critical levels. Food shortages were appearing on core worlds as agricultural distribution networks collapsed. Industrial production had fallen to pre-spaceflight levels on planets where humans had managed complex manufacturing systems. Energy grids were failing, as power plants designed for human operation sat idle. High Counselor Thex finally acknowledged what the moderate leaders had been trying to tell him. The Federation could not survive without human cooperation. Military force was useless against an enemy that your own civilization depended on for basic survival. The breakthrough came when Counselor Nixa and Harmonic Valdris arranged a secret meeting between Federation leaders and President Wells. The meeting took place aboard a neutral vessel in deep space, far from the political pressures of core worlds and the military posturing of hardline commanders. David found himself included in the negotiations as a representative of human space workers. He sat across from beings who had treated his species as property for 50 years, aliens who were now forced to recognize humans as equals because their civilization was crumbling without human support. The negotiations were tense and often hostile. Inquisitor Vorth attended under protest, making veiled threats about the consequences of human rebellion. But even he could not ignore the reports streaming in from Federation worlds. Power grids failing, food shortages spreading, industrial systems shutting down, and alien populations demanding answers about decades of deception. President Wells presented humanity's terms with calm precision. No more protected status that was really enslavement. No more classification of humans as a primitive species. No more separation of families or forced labor assignments. No more neural implants or control devices. Equal representation in Federation. Governance and equal access to advanced technology. In return, humans would resume the work that kept galactic civilization functioning. But it would be voluntary work, properly compensated, with humans free to refuse assignments or leave Federation space if they chose. The hardline leaders protested, but the moderates understood reality. They had two choices: accept human equality, or watch their civilization collapse completely. The Great Silence had proved that humanity was not the weak species that needed Federation protection. The Federation was the one that needed humanity. After 6 days of negotiations, the Treaty of Terra was signed, establishing the framework for a new relationship between humans and aliens. The Great Silence was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. 5 years after the Great Silence ended, David Stone stood on the observation deck of the New Geneva orbital platform, watching construction crews from a dozen different species working together to expand the facility. Human workers operated in high radiation zones that would kill most aliens, while Kithra engineers provided technical expertise and Omnari energy specialists managed power systems that required their unique abilities. It was cooperation instead of exploitation, each species contributing what they did best while being fairly compensated for their efforts. The sight still amazed David, even after all this time. The transformation had not been easy or immediate. 3 months into Operation Silence, the Federation faced complete systemic collapse as critical infrastructure failed throughout their territory. Billions of aliens faced starvation, power failures, and the breakdown of basic services they had taken for granted for centuries. Some hardline leaders still called for military action against humanity, but their own forces were crippled by equipment failures and supply shortages. The Treaty of Terra had been signed under emergency conditions, but implementing its terms proved more challenging than anyone expected. Decades of ingrained attitudes could not be changed overnight. Many aliens struggled to accept humans as equals rather than servants. Many humans found it hard to trust former oppressors, who now claimed to want friendship. President Wells had spent the first 2 years after the treaty traveling throughout Federation space, working with local leaders to establish the new systems of governance and cooperation outlined in the agreement. She faced assassination attempts from extremists, protests from both human and alien populations, and constant political pressure from those who wanted to return to the old ways. But she had also seen remarkable changes. Human children were attending schools alongside alien students, learning about different species and cultures in an atmosphere of mutual respect rather than subservience. Human scientists were working with alien researchers on projects that combined their unique perspectives and capabilities. Human artists were creating works that inspired beings across the galaxy. Dr. Emma Cross had not lived to see the new world she had helped create, but her research continued to guide the transformation. The New Geneva Institute for Interspecies Understanding, built on the world that was once scheduled for atmospheric restructuring, used her work to help different species learn about each other's capabilities and needs. David had been promoted to admiral in the new Federation fleet, commanding a mixed crew aboard the starship Unity. His first officer was Counselor Nixa, the Cathera reformer who had risked her career to support human rights. His chief engineer was Ben Walsh, whose sabotage programs had proven that humans were far more technically capable than anyone realized. Maya Singh served as communications officer, her skills now officially recognized rather than hidden. The crew represented the new Federation at its best. Different species working together, as equals, each contributing their unique strengths to common goals. They were currently exploring the galaxy's outer rim, investigating reports of unknown civilizations that might pose threats to the peaceful worlds they had worked so hard to build. Anna Torres had become one of the Federation's most respected pilots, her ability to navigate dangerous space proving invaluable as they pushed into unexplored regions. Where alien computers failed and standard navigation broke down, she could guide ships through hazards that would destroy conventional vessels. Her skills were no longer dismissed as primitive human instinct, but recognized as a unique form of intelligence adapted to extreme conditions. The transformation was not without its problems. Some human colonies had embraced their newfound equality too enthusiastically, becoming aggressive toward alien populations and demanding preferential treatment as compensation for decades of oppression. Other worlds struggled with the economic changes as traditional labor arrangements were replaced by voluntary contracts and fair wages. Admiral Richards, who had once enforced Federation control over human activities, now served as humanity's primary diplomatic representative. His experience with both systems made him uniquely qualified to help negotiate disputes between species still learning to see each other as equals. He often reminded both sides that the goal was cooperation, not revenge. The most significant challenge came from outside the reformed Federation. Beyond the explored galaxy, ancient civilizations watched the political upheaval with interest and concern. Some saw opportunity in the Federation's moment of weakness. Others viewed the rise of humanity as a threat to their own plans for galactic domination. The first contact came when long-range sensors detected massive ships approaching from the galactic core. The vessels were larger than anything in Federation. Records, built by beings who had mastered technologies that made current Federation science look primitive. Initial communication attempts were met with demands for unconditional surrender from the upstart species that had disrupted galactic order. David found himself commanding the defense of worlds he had once helped oppress, working alongside former enemies to protect the new civilization they had built together. The irony was not lost on him that humanity's greatest test would come not from their former oppressors, but from threats that made the old Federation look peaceful by comparison. The enemy called themselves the Hegemony, a collection of ancient species that had ruled the galaxy's core for millions of years. They viewed younger civilizations as temporary inconveniences, allowing them to develop only as long as they remained useful. The Federation's transformation from a stable hierarchy to a chaotic democracy threatened their carefully maintained order. But the Hegemony had made the same mistake as the old Federation. They underestimated humanity. When their invasion fleet arrived expecting to face divided, weakened opponents, they instead encountered something unprecedented in their long history. Different species working together voluntarily, each contributing their unique strengths to a common defense. Human crews operated in combat zones where radiation and gravity would kill other species. Kithara tacticians coordinated complex battle plans with mechanical precision. Omnari specialists provided energy shields and weapon systems beyond conventional capabilities. Althari strategists developed philosophical frameworks that turned the enemy's assumptions against them. The war lasted 3 years, but its outcome was never really in doubt once the Hegemony realized they faced not just another collection of subject species, but a truly cooperative civilization. Their ancient divide-and-conquer tactics failed against enemies who had learned to trust each other through shared struggle. The final battle took place at New Geneva, the world that had become a symbol of the new Federation. David commanded the defense from the Unity while President Wells coordinated planetary evacuation plans. But the evacuation proved unnecessary as the combined fleet demonstrated capabilities that neither humans nor aliens could have achieved alone. When the Hegemony commander finally surrendered, he asked to speak privately with David. The ancient being, whose species had ruled star systems when Earth was still forming, wanted to understand how such a young civilization had defeated forces that had conquered galaxies. "Your strength is not in your weapons or your numbers," the commander said. "It is in something we abandoned long ago. You trust each other. You work together not because you are forced to, but because you choose to. We had forgotten such things were possible." The peace treaty that followed established new principles for galactic civilization. No species could claim dominance over others. Technology and resources would be shared based on need and capability. Conflicts would be resolved through cooperation rather than conquest. The galaxy was vast enough for all its children to thrive. Dr. Emma Cross had been right when she told David that truth would change everything. But the change had been bigger than anyone imagined. Humanity had not just freed itself from oppression, it had shown the galaxy a new way to exist. Different species working together as equals, each contributing their unique gifts to a civilization greater than any one race could build alone. David kept Dr. Cross's final research note in his desk, aboard the Unity, reading it whenever he needed to remember why they had fought so hard for change. Never forget what we're capable of, not as a threat, but as a reminder. Strength without wisdom leads to tyranny. Wisdom without strength leads to slavery. Humanity learned both lessons on a world that tried to kill us every day. That makes us the perfect guardians of galactic peace. As the Unity prepared for its next mission to explore uncharted regions of space, David reflected on how far they had all come. The galaxy was still vast and full of unknown dangers, but they no longer faced those challenges alone. They faced them together, as equals, as partners, as friends. The age of human servitude was over. The age of galactic cooperation had begun. And somewhere in the space between stars, new civilizations waited to learn what this strange alliance of different species could teach them about the power of working together instead of fighting apart.